very strange. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our program, Drought Proof Your Garden. This is in partnership with Our Water, Our World and the Alameda County wide Clean Water Program. And I'm Suzanne Bontempo, and I have Charlotte Canner with me today, and we're going to talk to you about drought proofing your garden. Okay, so we're going to go through slides for about 45 minutes, as I mentioned, and we're going to leave time for your questions at the end. But what we're going to learn this afternoon is gardening in California. We're going to talk about that. We're going to learn about water and how to use it efficiently. We're going to talk about irrigation troubleshooting and some tips for, to resolve any type of problems that might come up, tools for conserving water, tools for protecting our plants, and then leaving time for your questions. And our wonderful host this afternoon, our sponsor for this program, is the Alameda County-wide Clean Water Program. And they work to protect Alameda County's creeks, wetlands, and the bay from runoff that may carry pollutants into the waterways. Related to gardening, that means avoiding chemicals that can be washed off our lawn and gardens and into the storm drains by irrigation or rain. And to learn more about events, programs, resources, please go and sign up for their newsletter, which is at cleanwaterprogram.org.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Charlotte. Thanks for being here. So I just want to introduce, many of you aren't familiar with our Water Our World program, so I'm going to introduce you. Our Water Our World is a program designed to bring awareness between pesticides and water quality and provide pest problem solving education. Our materials are located in stores throughout Alameda County and other Bay Area counties. We usually partner with hardware stores and garden centers. What you'll see in the stores that we partner with, you'll see a rack. Most stores have a rack like on the photo on the left with info about common pest problems. And then some stores also have these little blue tags on the shelf that highlight the eco-friendly products on the shelf. You can also see all the materials, the fact sheets and list of eco-friendly products on the website ourwaterourworld.org. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to integrated pest management. That's what we practice at Our Water, Our World. IPM is or I won't go too deep into it, but just a brief overview because we usually talk about pests. So we're going to learn about drought today and keeping our gardens healthy with the context of knowing that healthy gardens will lead to less pests. So integrated pest management is a holistic view of pest management. It looks at the bigger picture and asks a lot of questions before taking actions. And it takes certain eco-friendly actions first. So identification is the first step. We want to make sure we are identifying the pest and understanding how it lives and why it's there. There are some preventative measures that we can take in our garden, maintaining a healthy garden through proper watering, which we're going to talk about today. Sanitation, implementing some tools like fencing and other things to prevent pests from even arriving. And when pests do arrive, we want to monitor them, watch for growth. Maybe it's not a problem, so we can let the pests just do their thing and then they'll go away soon enough. But then sometimes we do want to take action. And when we take action in IPM, it's a series of different kind of controls, they're called. So mechanical controls are physical tools and barriers like fencing, weeding tools, other barriers to keep pests away from our homes or our gardens. And there's biological controls, which is using other critters, insects and critters to keep pests in balance. And then lastly, as a last resort, there's chemical controls, which would be pesticides, always using eco-friendly and as little as possible. Then we want to make sure we're always evaluating and keeping track, seeing if what we did worked, and if not, we'll try something new. And then we're also going to look at the big picture. So watersheds, as Suzanne already mentioned, the Clean Water Program focuses on keeping our watersheds clean, and this program really draws a direct line between what we do in our yard and our waterways, because there is a direct line. So the San Francisco Bay, or where we Alameda is in the San Francisco Bay watershed. Half of all water that falls on California, either in rain or snow, drains into the San Francisco Bay. And so when it travels all the way from the Sierras all the way down through urban environments and rural environments, it picks up pesticides, motor oil, pet waste, debris, all these other things with it, and it funnels it into the bay. And then I want to note that any water or anything that enters the storm drain at the street level does go directly to a creek or a waterway. It does not go to a water treatment plant first, and pesticides are also, and it doesn't go to a water treatment plant first. So everything we're doing in our yards is direct line to our waterways. So that's why we want to make sure that we're being safe and being mindful out there. So gardening in California, we have a unique climate here. It is mild and usually wetter, hopefully, in the winter time, and pretty dry, almost no rainfall throughout the summer. So we're used to periods of dryness. This isn't unusual for us, but what's happening this year is a little bit unusual. I'm sure you're all aware that we are in a drought. So the drought is, well, it's not a drought because it's not raining. That's the point. We don't usually get rain in the summer. We're in a drought because we've had several years of dry conditions, and now that's leading to very extremely low reservoirs. So what's happening is that the snow melt, usually what happens in the mountains is snow melts slowly throughout the spring, and it recharges those reservoirs, allowing us to have drinking water throughout the year. What's happening is that the snow melted quickly because it was very warm early in the spring, and it melted on dry land. So the water just got absorbed into the soil, and it didn't make it trickle down into the reservoirs. So the reservoirs are not being recharged, and that's what's making this drought so scary, because our reservoirs are at record lows. And we want to be mindful of how plants react during a drought, because when they get stressed with long periods of without water or long periods of heat, they'll slow down their growth. They'll also close their pores, so their stomata, which are like their pores that they like kind of breathe and transpire out of, they'll close them up. So you'll see that on the bottom right, that like wilty plant is, the pores are closed. It's not allowing any water to evaporate, and it's also not able to take in any water as well. So, and then other things that happen, their defense systems against pests are weakened because they're focused on preserving all of their water, and they slow their growth, so you might not have as many fruits and veggies as you were hoping. So all of these things will lead to a stressed out plant. So we're going to talk about how to reduce that stress on the plant today.
One more thing I can add is that when the stomatas on those plants are closed, the plant is not able to photosynthesize. And so that's another reason why we might start to see leaves turn yellow, or there might be leaf drop. You'll definitely see maybe some stunted growth and so forth. So these are all things that we want to protect our plants from. And so we are going to do that by looking at water. So we can look at water, how we can water more efficiently to keep our gardens healthy through this time. We're also going to look at different ways to conserve the water and strategies to water properly. So watering during a drought doesn't mean to water less or more, but it really means to water wisely. We really want to get the water around that root zone. We really want it to stay there for as long as possible in a healthy way, not rotting the roots of the plant. And so many of us mentioned that we're watering by hand, which is wonderful. I'm a big fan of hand watering myself. I have it in a combination with the drip system. But when we water by hand, we want to be as mindful as possible to focus that water at the root zone and really try to avoid watering the leaves of the plant or the top parts of the plant as much as possible. If we're watering the leaves of the plant, then we want to make sure we're watering earlier enough in the day that that water, all those little beads of water, can dry before sundown. Because if water is staying on the leaves of the plant, then we can be encouraging different type of fungal diseases like black spot or rust. So we really want to focus around that drip line to get the most to be most efficient with our watering. And if you're watering by hand and your nozzle does not have a shutoff valve or a trigger nozzle, then please go to your local hardware store and pick one up, because they're not that expensive. And this is really the first step in saving water, is we turn the hose water off as we move from like container to container or garden bed to another garden bed. And even though it might seem like it's only, 3 or 10 seconds, that's water we're saving. So every drop counts. And then let's talk about our drip irrigation systems. Drip irrigation systems can be very effective and very efficient when it comes to water usage. And the reason why is because we're able to really localize the emitters and really get the water where it needs to go. It's going to be a lot more efficient than pop-up sprinklers. The pop-up sprinklers are going to not be as efficient. They have a tendency to lose a lot more water through evaporation. And when not paying close attention, oftentimes those sprinkler heads can get tweaked, so the water isn't going where we want it to go. I do know that there are rebates out there for transitioning pop-ups to drip. So you might want to look into that, or reach out to your local irrigation supply stores for those parts. It's not difficult. But another benefit of working with drip irrigation is that it is making direct contact with the soil. So we are not losing any water to evaporation, especially if there's a nice layer of mulch on top. All that water is going straight into the soil and to the root zone. We can also set the clocks for early in the morning when the air is cool and the soil is cool. So I've seen on some of the water district websites, the best time to water, they really want all the irrigation systems to run from like midnight to 6 in the morning. Well, I'm going to narrow that down to about like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Because that's really going to be the best time, especially if you have pop-up sprinklers. It's not ideal to have the irrigation going off at night when that water is going to be sitting on the leaves for very long. We really want to make sure that that water evaporates rather quickly from the sun. And then another benefit for working with an irrigation controller is that we can set that clock for multiple start times so that we can pulse the water out. This would be beneficial for anyone that has a slope to prevent water from running off. We would have that irrigation controller, the time go on for a little bit before that water starts to run off, and then we'd have it turned off for a period of time so that water can infiltrate, and then we'd have that water the clock turn that water back on, and then off and on and off. We'd be pulsing that water out, or it's also called cycle and soak. But remember, these are not set it and forget it systems. For an irrigation system to be effective and efficient, it's up to us to control it properly and to get out there and monitor and make sure the water is going where it needs to go, and that we're really able to water thoroughly and evenly and deeply. And that we're not watering again until the top few inches is dry, depending on the plant material. And so we oftentimes will water with these emitters are going to be on the end of the drip irrigation system. And Charlotte, you can go 2 more. And these emitters are going to allow the water to come out at some type of flow rate. It's really important that we understand what is the flow rate of the emitters. is the water coming out at a rate of 1/2 gallon per hour, or is it coming out at a rate of 1 gallon per hour or 2 gallon per hour? Because if we don't know how much water is coming out at the end of the emitters, it's going to be really hard for us to set those clocks for a decent amount of time, because having a clock set for 30 minutes, 1/2 gallon per hour would only be directing a quart of water out to that area, whereas a 2 gallon per hour emitter would be providing 1/2 gallon of water. So it's a huge difference. Oh no, 1 gallon, a quart to 1 gallon. Anyway, you see what I'm saying. It's a very broad range. So we want to understand how much water is actually getting delivered to the garden. And when we water, we want to water at the drip line. The drip line is going to be the outer edge of the canopy of the plant. Now here we have some illustrations of trees. However, this is going to apply to our perennials, to our rose plants, to our tomato plants, any type of shrubs or trees. We really want to make sure we're focusing any type of water and fertilizer for that, same reason, out at the drip line where the little fibrous root hairs are. These are this is the part of the root zone that's actually absorbing the nutrients and the water. It's not ideal to water at the base or the trunk of the plant. And we really want to get in the habit and have the good understanding of watering deeply, because what we've learned is that roots really only go where the water goes. And to grow nice deep roots means we have to water deeply to encourage those roots to grow deep. If we're watering shallowly, we notice that then the root zones stay really shallow. And when we have excessive heat or days that are rather warm, that top couple inches of the soil will dry out very quickly. And then for the rest of that time before the irrigation comes on again, that plant is going to be rather stressed. And when that plant experiences stress time after time, it has a tendency to start to show signs of maybe poor growth habit, maybe yellowing leaves, maybe leaves are going to drop, maybe there's going to be, it's going to be affected with more pest problems and so forth. So it's really a good idea to get in the habit of watering deeply. And just to give you another idea of what I mean, this is a really awesome graph from this great book called Roots Demystified by Robert Cork. This graph is on a foot grid. It is not inches. So we're looking at beets. Beet roots, for example, they can go dive down about 10 feet, whereas tomato and peppers will dive down about that 4-foot range. So this is quite phenomenal. If we are really allowing the water to go deep, and where we really want to focus the water is we want to look at getting that water down about 5 to 12 inches, depending on what the plant material is and depending on how established that plant is. And trust me, the water will continue to work its way down to the lower depths of those roots. So we don't have to just have it, we don't have to worry about, oh, I have to water my beets to 10 feet. No, we really just want to get that water down about a foot, and then the soil and the microbiology in the soil will do the rest for us. And then we're not watering again until that top zone is really dry, because the roots are they have access to all of this water that is captured deep in the ground.
And we do want to remember that when we have our planting new plants, they're going to need water a little differently than our established plants. Young plants will, as you can see in this photo, their roots are only so big, so we don't need to be worrying about irrigating them to a foot if their roots are only a couple inches long. But we do want to continue to have that idea of encouraging them to go deeper. So young plants, especially, either seedlings or plants that you've got from a nursery and just put in the ground, are going to need more water than established plants. And I just want to share what established means. Perennials need about a year to be established. So that means they really just have their roots, their roots have really grown enough, and they are pretty much like settled into the space. Small and medium shrubs need about 2 years to get established, and trees will need 4 to 5 years to get established. So we remember, but we do need to remember that as plants grow, the roots are growing, so we need to expand where we're watering. We're still not, we're not going to focus the water right at the base. We're going to expand out, continuing to encourage the roots to grow further. Here's just a picture of the roots, very small as it comes right out of the pot, but to encourage them to get out of that nice cube shape, we do want to shake it out a little bit. You can use one of those nursery tags to score the roots. That's going to encourage the roots to expand out more as well. Again, we're going to adjust the irrigation as the root grows. This image, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's an image of an irrigation line that was installed probably when this tree was much smaller and brand new. So the irrigation line, the emitter is right up against the crown of this shrub. So what needs to happen is really that emitter needs to move out many feet away from the crown of the plant and not be watering directly at the trunk. The crown is the base where the above ground parts and the below ground parts meet. We don't want water or any dirt or mulch covering up that area. So how much do your plants need? How much water do your plants need? And remember, again, the tags. Look on the tags when you're buying them at the nursery. They will give you a clue of how much your plant needs. And that's going to be how much it needs once it's established. So remembering still, they're going to need more water when they're getting in the ground. No water once established really means that it's like you get it ready and settled in the ground, and then that's it. You don't want to water it. I know it's hard. You want to baby your plants, you want to help them, but really plants like that, when they say that, they mean no water. You can actually kill your plant by watering it if it doesn't want it. Low water means you still want to water it thoroughly, but you do want to let it dry out between waterings, almost to the point of bone dry. So extremely infrequent, but thorough watering. Regular or moderate water means you're going to give it a nice soaking and then let the top few inches dry out before watering it again. And then ample water or high water means it really likes to be moist pretty much all the time. So you still might want to, still a good idea to let the top inch or so dry out, but you're going to keep that pretty moist through and through. And now neither Suzanne or I can tell you exactly how you need to water your plants in your yard, because every yard is different, every plant is different, depends on a lot of factors, but there are some really great resources out there to get you started to understand that. So this is the East Bay Municipal Utility District from the website. It's a landscape watering schedule depending on what kind of plant material it is, either lawn or landscape, and then what kind of irrigation you have. It's not really including hand watering, but you can at least get an idea of what the needs are. So that's a great starting place. And then you really want to observe. You're going to really get to know your garden. Once you water, then really observe. Go back, dig around, look at the soil. Is it moist? How deep is it moist? Because every plant type and needs different watering needs. How established it is, again, needs more or less water. The texture of your soil, either clay or sandy, will affect your watering schedule. And if there's a layer of mulch, that's going to keep the moisture in longer. And then the different microclimates of your garden, the amount of sun, shade, wind, or slope that you're getting in your yard is all going to affect the amount of watering you're going to need to do. Another great idea to make your watering more efficient is to increase the permeable surfaces in your garden. This is actually going to be really beneficial in the rainy season, but also when you're watering as well. In the rainy season, when water hits those permeable surfaces, that will be decomposed granite, gravel, bricks, stone pathways, or mulch pathways, anything that water can infiltrate, that water is going to go down into those pathways, into the soil below them, and it's going to be available to those plants. So you can see, like on the bigger photo with the decomposed granite walkway, those plant roots, those plants come right up to the edge of that walkway. That doesn't mean the roots stop there. The roots go down underneath that walkway. So when you're able to get that soil underneath that walkway moist and keep that moist, that's going to be better for your plants in the long run as well.
All right. Thank you, Charlotte. And I see that we have a number of questions that have come in that we are going to answer. So through the next couple sections of the program. So hold tight. We will answer those questions for you. Alrighty, so I'm going to talk about different ways we can source water on our property and how we can really utilize the water we already have on site, which is pretty fun. So this is a simple, most of us are already doing this. We're harvesting water from the sink or the tub with the bucket. That one's pretty easy, waiting for that water to warm up. We're able to capture many gallons of water, or even, if we're cleaning our vegetables, we can capture that water, or from the salad spinner. These are all really easy ways to capture water. But I'm a huge fan of Greywater, and I'd like to introduce more of you to how easy it is and how what a great resource Greywater is. I saw that a few of you on our poll are already utilizing Greywater from your house to water the garden. It's a wonderful resource. Thanks, Charlotte. So laundry to landscape Greywater systems are going to be one of the easiest systems to install. There is no code, or I'm sorry, there's no permit required in the state of California. Three wonderful resources for you is going to be stopwaste.org, greywateraction.org, and then the urbanfarmerstore.com. They've teamed up. Greywater Action wrote the code for Greywater in the state of California. They teamed up with the Urban Farmer Store, and both of these resources that they've developed are on the Stop Waste website. So please have a look. Essentially what Greywater laundry to landscape systems are is using the water from your washing machine. The water from your laundry is going to have beneficial nutrients that really favor the plants and the soil. So it is a real wonderful, easy way to water plants such as trees and shrubs and larger perennials, smaller perennials, plants that really require to have a nice deep soak, a nice volume of water that is going to get delivered throughout the garden. A couple things to keep in mind. The easiest way to install is going to be a situation where your washing machine, it does share the wall with the outside. So it does share that wall that is, the garden is on the other side of that wall. Much easier than if it were in the middle of the house. If your washing machine is in the middle of the house, you will need to plumb underneath the crawl space and deliver the water out to the garden that way. And that might not be accessible. Another important thing to keep in mind is that your washing machine needs to be at or above the grade of the garden. The washing machines, if it's below the grade of the garden, that water pumping out into the garden could put too much pressure on your washing machine pump. And so that is why it is preferred that the washing machine, or it's required that the washing machine is at or above the grade of the garden. And so what you're going to be installing is a 3-way diverter valve. So it allows the water now to either go out to the garden or to go to the sewer, into the sewer system as it is currently. So there is this valve that allows you to decide, are we going to water the garden with all the water from this load of laundry, or is this a load of laundry that I need to use maybe bleach or something a little harsher that I don't want to go into my garden? A couple of things to keep in mind is that we want to make sure we're using Greywater compatible laundry detergents. So on the Greywater Action website, there is a list of brands that are going to be Greywater compatible. That means these are going to be laundry detergents that are plant and plant root and soil friendly. Okay, these are products that do not have salts or boron. So we want to really stay away from sodium and boron, which are both going to be a little toxic to the plants. So please check out that Greywater Action website, and you can find out how easy it is to install a laundry to landscape Greywater system. It can pretty much happen in one afternoon, and the cost is anywhere from $300 to $500. And you can do it yourself. You can also hire professionals, and they can come and they can install it. It'll be a little bit more, but easily they can take care of that for you. And then what I wanted to share was, I know that we're not in, we're a number of months away from rain, but I'd like to get you ready and prepared to be ready to receive the rain when it comes. We want to keep as much water on site whenever possible. What I wanted to share, for those of you that aren't familiar with how amazing it is to capture rainwater, that 1 inch of rainwater over 1,000 square foot surface allows you to capture over 600 gallons of water, which is phenomenal. So, a lot of times we think of these 50 or 55 gallon rain barrels that is like, such as the picture on the left. That's going to get filled up within moments. Whereas, nowadays they make these wonderful rain catchment systems that are long and narrow. They can go along the side of a house to save space. They could also go along the side of like a breezeway or the back of the house or along a fence. And they are able to capture a lot of gallons of water so that you can use this water throughout the dry season. Another photo I just love. This is on the Urban Farmer website. These are Bushman rain catchment tanks that are so cool. They're long and narrow, and they can go behind, in this case, a screen. This privet hedge is going to grow so you don't even see them. They're along a back fence. And this is thousands of gallons of water that they've captured, that now they can water that hedge, and they can also water that lawn and any other plants that they have throughout the entire year without tapping into the municipal water supply at all. So free water comes from the sky, and it's amazing to keep it on site whenever possible. Okay, and so now we're going to look at some water troubleshooting. So let's take a look at some of the common questions we get asked all the time and some common mistakes. So we get asked this question often. How do I know if I'm overwatering or underwatering? And the only way you're going to know is by actually digging down and feeling the soil. So have a look, get your fingers down in that soil, or get a trowel or whatever you like. But the way we can tell is by feeling the soil. Oftentimes what happens, this happens to me, this happens to Charlotte, this happens to a lot of us, a lot of us that we call ourselves professionals. We've been doing this for a long time, so we think we know best. But you might think in your head that you've watered an area by hand really well. But what I'd like to share is go back and just double check, because sometimes what happens is that first round of watering, it takes a minute for that water to actually infiltrate. So what we might think we've watered really, really thoroughly in our head, if we go back and check, that water only got down about, half an inch. So what's nice is that we can go through and give everyone a nice, watering, but then we want to go back over and we want to water again, because sometimes it takes that second round where we can actually get that water to infiltrate into the soil. So get in the habit of checking so that you can really know. You can really know what's going on. That's the only way we can know. The only way we can tell you how much to water is for you to actually check and see, do you need to water more? Or maybe you don't need to water at all. So some helpful tools out there. They have moisture meters that are on the market at your local garden centers, your local hardware stores. These can help you out. For those of you that want to just use the ease of these, go ahead. You can also just put a trowel in the soil. You can get, like maybe a wooden stake that's rather dry because it'll show the watermark. When you pull it out, it'll show the watermark if it's dry or wet. But really, I can't encourage you enough just to get in there and feel that soil. Because another thing is that the soil might look dry when it's really wet. So this was happening earlier this season at in my garden. I didn't get a chance to put clay. I'm sorry. This looks like clay. I didn't get a chance to put mulch over all of my clay soil. So what happens is that the very top inch of that soil is always, or the very top even quarter inch, it's really just a quarter of inch. It's going to look dry because of the wind and the sun. But if you dig down, it's really moist. It's still quite damp. In fact, there's earthworms there. So what would happen is I would water at the early part of the day, because as I shared, I have drip irrigation, but I also have hand watering in some areas. And then in the evening, the late afternoon, my husband would go out and water because he said it looked dry. So we realized we were double watering, which is not ideal for the plants and not ideal for the water bill. So it's a good idea just to get out there and just check. Just get in the habit of checking. That's the best way to handle it. Because a lot of times the plants might look wilted and they don't need water. So plants will have, they show signs of stress in a number of different ways. Overwatering can also cause plants to wilt. So please, we are just so wanting to take such good care of our plants. When we see a wilted plant, we just want to run out there with some water. But please check first, see if that soil is wet. And hey, if that soil is wet and you're like, why is this wilting? It could be a situation where the irrigation emitter is broken and it's just super soaking that area. Or give that plant a little wiggle, maybe a gopher got to it. So that's something that happens on a regular basis as well.
Yeah, if it was great one day and then it looks really sad the next day, just pick it up. If it still has its roots, then you're good, or something else is the problem. My guess is it doesn't have its roots anymore. So that's Suzanne gave us some ideas for how to store our water, any water like that comes in the winter time, and some other things. But what can we do right now? We can check for leaks in our irrigation system. Remembering it's not a set it and forget it system. We want to make sure we're checking frequently to make sure that the water is getting to our plants where we want it, and that there's not excessive water getting out anywhere. So there's some easy tools you can use, or just they're called goof plugs. You just plug up the holes, or you can reattach pretty easily. Oh yes, goof plugs and compression fittings. So if there is a leak, you can reattach it. Quite simple. We want to make sure we're eliminating any runoff and overspray. Water hitting a pavement is not going to do anyone any good. It's just going to evaporate, and that's not really where we want it to go. We want it to be in the soil. More water in the soil is best. So making sure that we're not aiming the sprayers or sprinklers or anything over the pavement. And we want to add compost. So increasing organic matter in our soil is going to turn our soil into a sponge. That's why we have that sponge picture right there. We really want to think of our soil as a sponge, and compost will help create that. It turns, so it increases the water retention in the soil. Compost and organic material has like a gluey quality to it. So it glues soil particles together, creating more especially if you have sandy soil where water kind of rushes right through it. If it's held together more by that organic material, it's going to hold the water better. And then if you have clay soil, compost will actually break up the particles a little bit and add pore spaces and still hold that water there when we need it. So it increases the ability for water to infiltrate our soil. It increases the amount of water our soil can hold at a time and keep available for our plant roots. And yeah, even deep down, even when the plant, and that's why we want our plants to have nice long roots, because that water can be held very deep and it will still have access to it. And by increasing organic matter about 5%, your soil's water holding capacity quadruples. So that's just adding 5%. So think of, it's really just adding like an inch or so of compost to the soil surface and gently digging it in. That is adding a lot of water retention to your soil. And that image, it's kind of it's demonstrating what compost can do for both clay and sandy soil. As I said, with clay, it'll break up the clay to make it better, easier for water, roots, air to infiltrate. And with sandy soil, it'll actually like glue it together so things aren't just water, nutrients aren't just rushing through it. And mulch is another really great tool to use to prevent evaporation. So and keep that water in our soil. So when I refer to mulch, it really mulch is anything covering the soil, but you're going to get the best benefits from a organic mulch. So that could be bark, wood chips, straw, leaves and lawn clippings, things that are going to break down over time and add nutrients to the soil. Gravel, oyster shells don't really, they can have some benefits, but they actually can get quite hot in the sun, so they can actually make your soil a lot hotter actually. So you want to stick to the organic mulches. When soil is dry, it can be hydrophobic, which means that it actually repels water, and water really struggles to infiltrate. And when you use mulch, that can help keep that water there so it can slowly infiltrate your soil instead of just rushing off. Mulch also reduces water evaporation significantly. A 2-inch layer of mulch will cut your water usage down by, I believe it's 20%. And mulch can also regulate the soil temperature. So during the hot days of summer, that top few inches of soil could get really hot, and those roots, the roots that are there are very sensitive to temperature. So when you're using mulch on top, it's like a little blanket or insulation. It actually cools the top 4 inches. 2 inches of mulch will cool the top 4 inches of your soil by 10 degrees. We do want to make sure we keep mulch away from plant stems because it can invite fungus. We want to make sure we're using organic fertilizers. These are fertilizers sourced from organic materials, so manure, fish, kelp, compost, and other sources. These are going to be a more sustainable way to feed plants slowly and consistently over time. And importantly, for times of drought and low water, synthetic fertilizers, which are derived from petrochemicals, can have high salts or can be high in salt. So over time, the more you use synthetic fertilizers, there's going to be salt buildup in your soil, which can inhibit the ability of your plants to take up water. We're going to want to grow native. So native California plants are suited for this climate. So they're used to mild, wetter winters and dry summers. So they can tolerate lots of dryness and heat during the summer. So if we have plants that are suited to that, then we're not going to have to worry about watering them all summer and babying them. They're going to be happy, they're going to be pest-free, or have less pest problems. Well, I'll not say pest-free, but they'll have less pest problems for sure. And they're going to be more water efficient as well because they'll be drought tolerant. And you really do want to make sure you're steadying your yard, because you're not going to put you don't want to put a high sun plant in a shady area. You really want to steady your yard. There are microclimates within each person's yard, within each yard. So you want to really look, where is this warmer, sunnier area, whereas maybe there's a lower shady area that stays quite moist. You want to make sure you're putting plants in the conditions that match their needs. There's also pest and disease resistant varieties out there as well. So ask your neighbors, do they have a lot of pests and diseases? Maybe you'll want to get a disease resistant variety if you get the same plant. And heirloom veggies are actually a really wonderful way to just try cool, new, interesting veggies. And they're also, the heirloom veggies from Mediterranean regions are more ideal for the climate. They're going to be need less water, more drought tolerant, and suited for the heat. And some more resources for you for finding the appropriate plants. The BASCA website, we're going to send all of these, or you probably already have all of these resources, so don't worry about writing them down. But BASCA website has plant lists for pollinators or lawn replacement. Then there's Stop Waste, the California Native Plant Society, which has all the native plants and their needs, what might be right for you. The local master gardeners, their website will have lists suited towards each area. And then this book, Plants and Landscapes of Summer Dry Climates, is available from the East Bay Municipal Utility District. Great book with all plants that can tolerate hot, dry summers.
All right. I see we've had a lot of great questions. We're still getting through those questions. It's really wonderful. Thanks. Keep the questions coming. All right, so when we have our gardens and we might want to add some new plants to the garden. A couple of things to keep in mind is we want to take note of what that zone is. We have different microclimates in our garden, throughout that watershed of our garden. There are different zones. And when we're adding new plants, we want to make sure that those plants are going to match that zone. And that zone we're talking about are the water needs of that zone, but also the sun, the shade, the wind, the heat, everything. And we want to also make sure that those plants, when they get that mature size, are going to fit in that space. So these tags are really helpful. We mentioned we're going to get a lot of information on them, and we're going to make sure when we're adding plants to the garden, we are going to group them within the same irrigation zones and other microclimate need zones. When we are adding new plants to an area that is already established, it's really important that we then keep the irrigation system set for that established planting zone, and we're just going to hand water those newly planted plants to supplement that water until they become established. And we want to take advantage of fall, the rainy season of fall. So know that when we start to, we all love to go to the garden center now. I even went there today earlier, but we're about to have excessive heat over the weekend. So what did I do? Yes, I bought some plants, but they're not going in the ground yet. They're going to stay on the shade of my back deck, and I'm going to make sure I kind of baby them. And if I need to bring them in, they're fine. But once I get them planted, I'm going to have to really pamper them a lot and make sure I'm watering them a little extra from the water I've harvested from in the house. and not turn up my irrigation system or adjust it in any way, because I'm just really wanting to favor that. And understand that in the fall, another benefit of planting, not only are we about to get rain, hopefully, we're also moving into shorter daylight hours, cooler evenings, and that plant has months before the heat of the next summer comes on to become established. So it's a really great time to take advantage of all of those environmental bonuses and plant in the fall. And if we do have lawns, some of us still have lawns, which is fine, just consider reducing the size of your lawn. And you want to consider doing this in the fall, and look at the rebates that are available. And if you're interested in reducing the size of your lawn, look into those rebates before you do anything, because oftentimes they need to actually see that there is a lawn that you want to reduce the size of or replace. Because keep in mind that 1,000 square foot lawn on average needs about 500 gallons of water a week. That's a lot of water. So consider replacing it or reducing it with some low water use plants. And we're going to monitor our gardens. We're going to pull weeds. Since they compete for water, we want to make sure we are pulling those weeds. We're going to monitor our garden for pests and diseases. We're going to prevent fungal spores from spreading in the wind, such as powdery mildew. Now, powdery mildew, unlike black spot or rust, thrives in dry, hot conditions. So we're going to monitor. The first sign of powdery mildew, for instance, on the leaves of my roses, I'm just wiping it right off, because those spores wipe right off. Something else I can do is I can fill up a spray bottle with water and syringe, just blast those spores with water. It washes them off. Again, I want to make sure I'm doing this during the early part of the day so that water can evaporate by sundown. We also want to keep in mind that harvesting our fruits and vegetables, all our food crops, when they're ready, because when those food crops are staying on the plant, they're actually competing for water. And the best time of the day to harvest food crops is early in the morning, when the temperatures are still fairly cool. That's when the sugars are at its peak. So it's a good idea just to get out there every day, check out your garden, monitor for all these things, and harvest your food crops. Oh, and now we're going to talk about tools to protect our plants. So these are going to be tools that we can also use right now to protect our plants. So what happens is that when we have summer dry, our plants are acclimated to, established plants are acclimated to the summer dry of our climate here in California. However, when we start to go into these days of excessive heat, the plants might not be acclimated to that, or they haven't, they're not ready for it. So they could actually get sunburned, and we call that sunscald. And we might see it all on the south facing or the southwest facing side of the plant. So if you all of a sudden go out there and see a lot of this almost like translucent bruising on like fruit or the vegetables, or if you see a lot of browning on the leaves throughout like a shrub or a hedge, that's going to be sunscald. So you might be inclined to want to prune it off. However, you don't want to prune it off. You actually want to leave it, because if you do prune it off, you're going to now expose other leaves or other fruits to become burned. And that sunscald on the tomato, we could just cut that right off. Anyway, go ahead, Charlotte. Thank you. Something else that we can look into is taking advantage of shade cloth. So the shade cloth is really wonderful. It's going to protect our plants from that sunburn. However, we want to make sure we're tenting it rather high. We're not draping it right over the plants. We want to make sure that air circulation is still there. And we can also protect our young fruit trees or any young trees or shrubs with proper sun protecting plant paint. which really great product by IV Organics. Or you can also use any latex paint you have around the house, as long as it's a light color and you want to mix it 50-50 with water. Okay, Charlotte. Okay, thanks. So some shade cloths that we might anyway, thanks. The shade cloths that we want to use would be anything from like 30 to 50%, which would be ideal for protecting vegetables. Most plants grow best with a maximum shade of 40%. But just to keep in mind, you know, let's just say a neighbor just had a tree removed, or you just had a tree removed, and what was once shade is now in full sun. We can use something that's going to be maybe a 75% or higher shade cloth. And just to keep it in perspective, we love to, what's ideal for us is anything that's 80 to 90%. So just something to share. And we're almost finished. I know we're at 5 o'clock. We just have a couple more slides. And another product, some other products I'd like to share with you that are really cool and seem to only get, you know, really popular at the garden centers is during times of drought. But there are these sprays that we can spray on our plants. They're called anti-transpirants. And it's just a clear kind of waxy coating that is very short term. But what it does, it actually protects the plant from losing more water. So remember how we talked about this stomata will close up, those pores will close to prevent water transpiration. Well, when we use products like Wilt Stop or Cloud Cover, it's actually protecting that plant so it can still photosynthesize without losing water. So that's really cool. Ideal for newly planted plants or young plants or plants that haven't really acclimated to the summer dry, or that are just a little bit more prone to wilting during times of excessive heat. And then of course, we also have these hydrogels. These are water absorbing polymers that we will place around the root zone of the plant. They hold 200 times their weight in water and reduce the frequency of how often we need to water by 50%. Remarkable. The brand that there is a couple brands on the market, but a very common one is Soil Moist. The one on the left, pictured on the left in the blue bag, these are little soil polymers that will expand when we water. These are excellent for hanging baskets, window boxes, and containers. We do want to make sure that they are down at the root zone and not just, you know, mixing it into the top inch or two of the soil. Not ideal for in the ground or raised beds because these polymers are not biodegradable. However, Soil Moist makes a natural 100% biodegradable moisture retaining additive. So this is made, it's plant-based, and we are going to mix it into the soil upon planting. So this would be ideal for raised beds or maybe for annual vegetables, like maybe lettuces, something like that. And it will break down over time. So it will be safe to use in your soil. Really cool products that you can get today.
All right, and we're gonna just wrap it up a little bit. So a drought resilient garden, if you can make your garden more drought resilient, it will lead to healthy water practices, less plant stress over time, and therefore less pests. If you have your plant consistently healthy throughout, it will lead to less pests. And we're gonna focus on proper watering practices, watering deeply and infrequently, choosing the correct plants for our yards, for our climate, perennials are versus annuals. So annuals will need more water. We're grouping plants together that need the same amount of water, sun, and other protection. We're going to increase our permeable surfaces for our walkways and patios. We're going to use compost to increase the organic material, the organic matter in our soil, and mulch to protect our soil and keep it nice and cool and prevent evaporation. And then we can use the tools that Suzanne just spoke about, shade cloth, anti-transpirants, and hydrogels when needed as well. There are some online resources for you. We didn't talk too much about pests today, but if you do have pest questions, these two websites are quite helpful. The Our Water, Our World website has fact sheets about 18 different pests and lists about and information about eco-friendly products as well. And then the UC IPM website is just a massive database of so much information, all pests in California. It has this tool that if you don't know what you're actually looking at pest-wise, it's pretty amazing. You can narrow down using certain clues like leaf damage, what type of plant it is. I call it kind of the symptom tracker, like on WebMD. Narrow down what you could possibly have. And then there's some water saving rebates and resources from the city. The Alameda County Water District and BASCWA, the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, all have information about smart controllers, rain barrels, and lawn conversion. And this is Suzanne's photo. Shout out to Suzanne, who made a bee bath, I guess. You don't want to forget to provide drinking water to our pollinator friends. So a great idea is to make a nice shallow bowl, fill it with rocks, and fill it with water so that the bees can and their pollinators can access water, but it's not too deep for them, so they can still land on the rocks and get a drink without drowning. Very thoughtful. And please, thank you again for joining us, and please feel free to reach out to us if you have questions in the future. We'll be here for a little bit longer today answering your questions, but our email and our Instagrams are down there. And thank you also to the Alameda County-wide Clean Water Program for sponsoring the event.
All right, thank you everyone. I know that we just shared a lot of information with you, and